Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Wednesday investment show with Sasha. It's a modern investing. It's slightly different from traditional investing, and we'll discuss it how and why. And right now, I would like to introduce our guest. It's Shaquille Vladimir from Australia. He's a billion dollars fund manager, and also Jim Ede from California, from Ede Foundation. How are you today, Jim? How are you? How are you, Jim? Hello?
I'm not sure
Um,
he's getting us.
hey, Shaquille, can
Oh,
you hear me?
I can hear you, Jim. Yeah.
Yeah.
okay. Can you
Okay.
hear me, Jim? Okay. So now we can hear everybody. Okay.
Yes.
So let me first of all start with Shaquille. Tell me what's happened in the last week since our last show. What new ideas in investment and how the markets are doing and what you observed lately.
I'm very sorry. I'll have to just maybe cut to Jim if you don't mind. Those beeps
Okay.
are when the trade's going off, so I'll be right back with you if
Great.
that's okay.
Fantastic.
He's he's
Uh,
he's doing active
okay.
trading right now. So, uh, yeah.
Good. I have one order that I'm waiting to be executed
Uh,
too, but
so,
it hasn't been
my
done yet.
perspective.
Hello?
Well, since I'm the only one not actively trading at the moment, political situation is really um, tension. The heightened tensions are increasing in the United States because of partly because of the election that's impending in November, but partly because of the typical politics of the back and forth in the media, and partly because there have been a series of new books that have come out. One is Trump versus the United States by a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter named Michael Schmidt, and in that they had some real revelations about how decision making is going on in the White House. And then there's another book coming out, I believe today, with the reporting is that Melania is on tape saying some things that the White House would not like to hear. And these tapes are threatened to be broadcast. So I don't know, the markets hate uncertainty, and I don't know what the effects of this uncertainty is. And I'm jittery, just wondering how the market is going to react to these revelations of these two new books.
Well, what I see today on the market, though, is situation still the same. Operation saving private Donald, it's still on. Nothing's changes. Market is going higher and higher, and it's not all the market. I'm not saying that. Like Russell 2000 is still hanging there, but I think that's going to be the first one to crack. It appears to me. So I'm building up a position for that to happen. Now, the other stocks, basically, you have a few powerhouses. It's like Nvidia, which, if it going like this for another couple of weeks, is going to be $1 trillion company, yet another one. I remember myself a few years ago, I was buying their stock $12 a share, $13 a share. I was buying at 12 and I was selling covered calls, get out at 15. And I mean, it was a game chip maker, a good one, but so to speak. But now it's $600 stock. Unbelievable. Well, Apple, Tesla split and they're driving market ahead like crazy. They're going higher and higher and higher. So, and you know what? Probably too many people are waiting for some kind of correction, a fall correction, maybe late fall correction, or maybe early fall correction. And you know, when so many people are waiting for correction, it just doesn't happen. So maybe we are in the market that until November 3rd, it will just go every day 300 points higher on the Dow, and it's going to be just a trend which is impossible to fight, and nobody should. So from that perspective, on one hand, it's easy market because it's every day it's going higher and higher and higher. On the other hand, you know that it's not gonna last forever. So one day there will be a reversal. So you don't want to be caught up in reversal. So what to do? Not to trade, but there is a money on the table. How you can ignore it? So you must go and take your best bets. However, be careful here. What do you think, Shakil? What's happening right now on the market?
It's an interesting, it's an interesting situation. The markets are going up, and again, we talk about things like gold, and also something that is often a hedge or a safety play is to go into US government debt, and especially there's a lot of liquidity around 10-year notes. What's been very interesting is that futures contracts have indicated that they have actually moved up in price. So that means that yields have actually gone down from where they were last week, and they're still sitting at fairly high prices compared to historical averages. We're getting close to our highest prices that we've ever seen there, and that's an interesting scenario to see when you actually see the market going up. I think that's going to be a real struggle for people to navigate if they're professional traders. Some of that is, as Jim said earlier, to do, I think, with the election uncertainty. There's a lot of things coming out about Donald Trump at the moment, and whether or not he might have had many strokes, and things like that. And I don't read too much into that. I think that there's always going to be negative things said about an incumbent president, but obviously this one has been very, 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 very divisive and very, very polarizing for the United States. But even more so, I think what's causing a lot of the rush of flight to safety is the uncertainty, not just about the election, because it's really unclear who's really ahead. The polls are sort of swinging a little bit in either direction, but also the idea that you could end up with an election result that's not certain. Where there's a sort of prolonged period of time before there is actually an answer as to who won the election, and the market doesn't like that. Whether the market prefers one candidate or another is irrelevant. Whoever has won the election, that needs to be known sort of sooner rather than later. So I think that does cause a bit of uncertainty and causes a lot of the traders to think we might need to start looking at some level of safety, such as going to US debt, even if they are really, really low yielding at the moment.
So there are basically three major scenarios on the market right now. Hello, welcome back.
Thanks, Jim.
Silicon Valley internet issues.
Bill, how are you?
Good. How are you, Sasha? Thank you.
Yeah,
Hello,
we're just discussing. So an election may have three results, and let's see how market will react to each of these results. Number one, Trump wins. Number two, Biden wins. Number three, nobody wins, and it will go into contest, to courts, and everything else. In my opinion, market will go down in all three scenarios because, number one, if Trump wins, there's no longer need to support private Donald, and that's it. The market goes away. All the bits will drop. Nvidia will go from $600 to 325, and all the rest stocks are so on. Okay, logical. And then they can only later, maybe to a new year, they will get them up again to his integration and everything else back to normal. Because market is getting a little bit tired, to tell you. Number two scenario, Biden wins. Oh my God, what a terrible scenario. Now the socialism will be in America, and the communists will come to power, and everything else will be destroyed, and people will go on the streets and start killing each other, and so on. Market will drop. It's horrible scenario. The market will drop, and Nvidia will go down to $262.50, and everything drops down dead. Number three scenario, it's contest in court. This is the worst case scenario for the market. In that case, market will be killed. The Dow Jones will drop from where it is now 30,000. It will drop down to 7,500, and everybody will get crazy and sell everything. And the gold will go up to probably $6,000, maybe $6,500 an ounce, and that's what we're gonna see very soon. So, which one of the three scenarios is more likely, Bill, as a as a political-minded person. What do you think?
Okay, well, first, I just wanted to say that you're absolutely right. Historically speaking, with the stock market, they've always seen a downturn in the first 3 months, and that's of any new presidency. And I suspect that's generally because they're trying to figure out what the new administration's policy is going to be. In this one study that I read, that they also found that generally, with regard to the performance of the stock market over the term, whether it's 4 years or 8 years, that there is just about no difference between having a Republican president or a Democratic president in office, with a slight edge to the Democrats. But the markets always begin with a new administration or even a new term, slightly down, as you pointed out correctly, and then they pick up. Now, which scenario is most likely? Based on what I've been able to observe and people that I've spoken to and some of the polls that have come out, I think we're going to have a real nail biter, and I think it's going to come down to about 4 or 5 states, because currently in the 4 or 5, or I should say 6 swing states that most people commonly are referring to, that is Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Arizona. What we find is that nationally, Biden holds a wide lead, about 7% nationally, on the combined polls over Donald Trump. But when you get to and you allocate where all the states are likely to vote, as they have in the past, you get to these 6 states. And in these 6 states, Biden leads in 5 of them, but the lead narrows down to an average of about 2.7%. So it's up in Michigan at around 4. It's up in Wisconsin around 3.7. Up in Minnesota 3.7. A little closer in Pennsylvania. Biden is down by 0.3% in North Carolina, but he's ahead by like 2.3% in Arizona. So we're going to have a nail biter of an election in those 6 states, and I suspect at the end it's going to end up being a ground game, and I think Biden might very well pull it out. But in your situation, Sasha, it really doesn't matter if Trump wins, Biden wins. I suspect the only other option, that there's either a tie or a prolonged court battle, that I see as the real danger for the economy. And I'm really curious about how investors might look at it, because that would include a lack of a fiscal policy and or stability moving forward. And so therefore companies could not plan, therefore investors could not plan, because it would be marked by continued instability in the American government. And then there's just one other item that, Sasha, I wanted to ask you about. There has been a growing course of economists recently who are talking about the idea of a double dip in this recession, saying that we're currently in the pandemic, the midst of the pandemic recession, COVID and such, but they are now talking about a secondary recession within the recession. That is the double dip, because the layoffs, now that they've run out of unemployment and everything else, are going to be turned into permanent job losses. And industries are not spending money. They're conserving their cash because everything is uncertain. And it's beginning to affect the structural long-term employment. And that, the economists are now beginning to argue, is going to do more damage and leave more scars on the American economy. More like 2008 and the troubles we went through there. But I'll turn it back over to you, Sasha and Shaquille and Jim.
Thank you, Bill. My observations are, I'm listening in the morning on the channel CNBC, not because I love this channel in particular. In fact, a lot of their recommendations, I'm doing exactly opposite what they suggest, and make money most of the times. Because it's a fantastic, truly, I'm telling you, it's a fantastic way to do when there is such thing called the liquidation of of inventory. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
So when there is a certain stocks that they want to sell, they immediately start pumping what a great company is this and how its business improving and this and that. Even like kind of, I follow sometimes General Electric because, as you know, I was in and I sold covered calls and I ended up quite well. But what they're doing is that they're saying, okay, this company is right now is going through strategic changes and it's going to improve very soon and so on. So the stock is going from say 650 and going up to 665 to maybe 670 or so on. The only thing they start talking about other things and so on, stock is 620. So where's all improvements, strategic improvements, and other fantastic improvements? Where are they? Oh, people bought at 660, 670, now it's 620. Oh, well, guess what? They became now strategic investors. Now they're long-term investors. Now they're going to study General Electric, all its divisions, and who is running what, and how they will turn corners in this direction, and then they will fix that problem or so. They will stay there for at least 3 or 4 years until they will get tired of it all and just sell it and go into something else.
Yeah, they're investor jail. Investor jail. Right, Sasha?
Yeah. So it's basically it's a distribution.
You get in, you can't get out.
I'm just curious how people are, because people who are doing that, they're watching CNBC for generations. Probably their grandfathers still watching CNBC, and they're still doing that over and over and over. So another interesting observation is, yeah, Jim Cramer is fantastic. I always being entertained by Jim, but it's the same thing. Do the opposite thing what he suggests, and 99% you'll make money. Now, not because I don't think he's that bad. I don't know. I don't think. I just think he's not lucky. Whatever he's talking about goes down. He's just not lucky. That's it. I think he's a great investor, just not lucky, not very lucky. Another thing is, so from, I don't know, they start at 5 or 6 in the morning. I don't get up that early. I get up around like 7:30 or 8. So normally I started to make coffee and I turn on CNBC. Now they're talking, you know what, it's very interesting. It's they have a great product because they're all schooled how to start slowly and what's happened in Asia, what's happened in Australia, what's happened in Europe. And then you start talking faster and faster and faster, and futures are up, and this is up, and this guy said that, then they're bringing some for interview one guy, then another guy, and then okay, General Electric for the last 3 days, they stopped talking about General Electric anymore. It's lost case by now. So they're always trying to talk about something. So they generally show people, probably they're reading a newspaper, watching CNBC, having coffee, nice breakfast. So people feel good about themselves. So most likely they will call their broker and they will buy some stock or a mutual fund or just something to feel even better. And then the day starts and the day develops. All of a sudden, everything is going down. I mean, Dow is up because Dow is like their sort of their store. So everybody is watching at the store. They see Dow. Dow is up 250 points. Great. Now this stock is down. The other stock is down. So basically, there is a handful of stocks which are every day up. So when Donald Trump says that I built the greatest stock market in the world or so on, he's right, but he's right only about 6 stocks. He built great 6 stocks. That's all what he's done. The other S&P house, so we are talking about 474 stocks.
Wow.
94 stocks, right? They're nowhere there. I mean, some stocks are up, some stocks are down. They're all kind of, and there are so many companies zombies. They're just, they exist, but they don't make any profit. They cannot, they're trying to survive hardly or so on, but nobody talks about these companies. It's all irrelevant to what we are talking about. So basically what I would say is the market is going to be there. It's going to be higher until November 3. After November 3, we already discussed the 3 possible scenarios. Shaquille, your stage, please.
Right. Okay. Well, there was a lot there. I'll come back to you, Bill, on the three election outcomes. I think this is an interesting scenario. If you have a look at the UK, there was obviously a lot of volatility in the UK, in the Brexit, in the aftermath of Brexit. And of course, that made the UK a relatively less attractive place to go to. I hope that Jim's frozen, and that's not just his disapproval of me of my comments on politics. But no, I think that there's what you've seen in the UK is, although there was a lot of people who were very resistant and really didn't want to see the UK leave, the electorate has basically has decided, and the people that would prefer to remain accept that there is now a clear Brexit that's going to happen, and they're able to sort of get on with the job and just make the best of it. With the US at the moment, obviously, it's contentious anyway because there's an election coming into play, but also I think it's a little bit contentious because it's really about who's going to provide the best economic stimulus to not just the economy, but if we're talking about the markets, to the markets themselves. And part of that, I think, is the Democrats and around the world, centre-left parties tend to look after people at the bottom. And so we are seeing a lot of people in the United States and even in our own country here in Australia and the UK, where the markets are doing really well, but actual families, individual people are not doing so well. And you often see that this is where politics will shift a bit more to centre-left parties, because the idea is that, hey, the money's actually going to be sent to the bottom, which is also going to help the market improve, because that means that people are going to spend more, and that's going to trickle up through small businesses, and businesses are buying from wholesalers, and et cetera, et cetera. At the moment, you have a very top-heavy kind of situation. I tend to think that the market will probably stay pretty much on course if Donald Trump wins, just because there isn't really much of a surprise. People already know what he's going to do. It's kind of going to be fairly similar, although this time around he doesn't have another election that he has to win, so he might have a bit more freedom to kind of pursue the things that he wants to pursue. Whereas if it's a change of government, it might take a few months before people kind of work out what the plan is going to be moving forward. But I think that the reason why it's becoming a lot more jittery at the moment is that idea that we could end up in a situation where the election result isn't known, and it might be a prolonged court case and that sort of stuff. And again, I don't know constitutional law in the United States that well, but there's been a little bit of speculation in our media and things that I've read, where what happens past January the 1st, does that mean that Nancy Pelosi becomes the sort of temporary president until the situation's resolved? And I don't think that anybody really wants to see that, because you're going to end up in a situation where you just don't know what the situation is. And somebody who knows history a bit better than me might tell me whether or not that's ever actually happened in US history, and whether or not those constitutional plays and the constitutional things that are written in to sort of deal with issues like this, whether or not they're going to be adequate to address this. So I think the international market is becoming a little bit concerned with the US, and it's potentially looking at other areas where it may want to invest, and maybe a rush to safety, as I said before, with the US debt, and then perhaps investments elsewhere. The UK will be an interesting place to look at, to invest in. Interesting news today is that it came out in our press, and it was actually mentioned by our Prime Minister here in Australia, that Australia has now officially entered a recession. Now, we were very, very lucky here in Australia, because we weren't affected badly by 2008, by the Great Recession that you guys had and most of the world had. It was actually quite good for us. Our Australian dollar fell against most major currencies, and so that meant that our mineral resources and our exports were a lot more attractive, and that drove up jobs, and that drove up property prices here, and we actually had a really great time. We actually had a big boom. So this is actually the first time we've had a recession for about 30 years. So it's an interesting time, because it's if you don't want to invest in the US right now because you think the prices are too inflated, where do you put your money? And I think that's the big issue. I think that big companies, a lot of people, that's why there's that sort of rush to go to safety and just hoard cash for the moment until you can work out what the next step is. And that's dangerous, because it just means that you've got US debt levels, US debt prices at very, very high levels, at the same time as having market prices at very high levels, and something eventually has to give, I think.
Mm-hmm. Very good, Bill. What do you think about the situation? How it will be resolved? I mean, it's now equilibrium where the stock prices as Shakil said, too high. On the other hand, the yields are very, very low. We haven't discussed gold much. I mean, gold keeps its level, and in my opinion, have a good chance to go way higher. And finally, look at the market even as we speak. The Dow Jones is higher, more than 1%, almost 1.1. And the Russell 2000 is higher, slightly over 0.25%, quarter of a percent. You see, so there is a disconnect between Dow and Russell 2000. And if you will take all these large cap stocks like Apple, Amazon, and so on, and including now Nvidia too, they're in a class of its own, have nothing to do with Dow or with Russell or with anybody else. So what do you think?
Well, you know, to begin with, just to clear up what would happen, it really it depends on three things. Let's say that, and we're just talking exclusively about at the presidential level, because it gets very complicated, as Jim will explain to you, if we involve the entire Congress, which could be a possibility. But just sticking to the president, if it is a contested election over ballots and which ballots get counted, which ones don't, then we're going to see a replay of Bush v. Gore in 2000, except we're going to see it on a multi-state level. So there'll be multiple states and there'll be multiple lawsuits. That'll be in the courts.
And there is issue of mail votes. It may not even make it on time, right?
That's right. And that will all be subject to litigation if it's just the presidential election and they go with the mail ballots and the voting procedures and discrepancies. A separate way it could end up in a calamity is if the two candidates end up in a tie with the Electoral College. Now, the solution for that, the Constitution says that under that scenario, if we have an Electoral College tie, then the election is sent just to the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives then decide. Each state gets one vote, and so there would be 50 votes, and then they would decide who the next president would be.
But if it's a draw 25-25, then what?
Well, no. So if it's a tie, if it's 20, they keep voting until they get a winner.
Wow.
So ballot 1, ballot 2, ballot 3. Could you imagine? Okay.
Well, what's happened if Nancy will? Maybe they will not go into vote. Maybe she's in good health. Maybe she will rule for another 15 years herself.
Yes. Well, actually, no. I wanted to address that because I was going to go to the third one, which is what if we resolve the issues with the ballots and it's not a tie, but we don't have a president who's actually serving as president. And what occurs under that scenario is that it falls to the president pro tem of the Senate, which is the senior most serving senator in the United States Senate. And in this case, currently, it's Patrick Leahy of Vermont. He's been in the Senate 51 years. It doesn't go to the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House comes in with a under the rules regarding a normal succession. So if the president, something happens to the president, and something happens to the vice president, that assumes that they've taken the oath of office and they're in office and something happens to them. Then the Speaker of the House becomes the president of the United States. And it's not interim. It's president of the United States until, an election. What we're talking about is, what if we don't have a president? And when they say, listen, if we don't have a president that's sworn in at 12:01 on January 21st, Inauguration Day, then if it's in the courts, that all gets litigated, or if it's something else. In the meantime, Patrick Leahy would serve as president of the United States.
If I could just ask a question there and just to sort of make a comment. Firstly, just out of curiosity, is the senator from Vermont, is that a Democrat or a Republican?
He's a Democrat.
He's a Democrat. The second thing, I asked a question a few weeks ago, and Jim actually replied. I was sort of wondering about the wisdom of having Kamala Harris from California as opposed to having somebody from a more contentious state or a more contentious sort of area, swing area. And Jim actually had said to me that, or said to our audience on Economics Mondays, that actually it's a good idea to do that because they don't actually have a seat. They're the vice president. So I said, okay, right. Well, that's totally different to what we have, for example, in Australia. As I said, your political system does deviate somewhat from our system. So I just wanted to actually ask you, the Speaker of the House, are they actually elected into an area, and then the party who has the majority in that chamber then elects one of their members to be the Speaker? Is that how it works?
Yes, except that you added an extra step. It's real simple. It's that whoever is in the majority, whether it's Republican or Democrat in the House of Representatives, that group, that political group, then selects somebody from amongst themselves to serve as Speaker of the House. Much like,
So we actually had a situation.
Right, Jim? Jim, did I get that right? Jim?
Yeah, you have a majority and a minority party.
Yeah. So we actually had a very interesting situation that's in Australia. It's actually happened a couple of times now, where we've had what we call a hung parliament. So that's pretty similar to, I think, what you're describing. If the electoral college is tied, and what you've said is that they just keep voting through the House of Representatives. So what we actually had in Australia is although we do have a two-party preferred system, as I think most countries do, you also have some of your minor parties like the Greens and some independent party members and things like that. And they can actually form a coalition with one side or the other in order to give them the extra votes that they need, or the extra seats that they need to form government. So I actually don't know what happens under the Australian Constitution if it was absolutely deadlocked and there was no movement, but I think it's unlikely to occur, but it potentially could. But I think as well, because your system is so different to the systems that we're used to elsewhere, and a lot of us still have, sort of Commonwealth systems and systems that theoretically are still part of, ruled by monarchy or something similar, like we have a Governor General in Australia, we have a Governor General in Canada. Because your systems are a little bit different to that, I think, again, that adds a lot of uncertainty to international investors, because it's what happens if this, what happens if that, and there seems to be a whole myriad of things that might potentially happen, and that's never good, I think, for the markets. It always causes that uncertainty.
Yeah, I guess, and Sasha, just to circle us back, because it's extremely important, and that is that would be the political uncertainty, okay, until the election was resolved. So whether it's in the courts or it's in the House of Representatives, and if Leahy is serving as the president. The question then becomes, at least on the economic side, currently the administration is trying to pass a stimulus bill right now. Now, there have been reports that Biden, were he to be elected, would be pursuing at least two more stimulus packages, one in the amount of $1 trillion and one approximately the amount of $3 trillion. But I guess the question is, for all three of you, is that how would the market react with instability in the American political system and the lack of a stimulus package? Because if we are in a period where we don't have a president, we would not have any kind of fiscal stimulus package, and that I suspect would damage the economy, because we are propped up by that. But how would you, as investors, go about looking at that kind of market?
Jim, please.
Jim.
Oh, thank you, Sasha. Because my internet is wobbly, I'm going to just say recession, and I don't think that that's accurate at all. If you look at what is happening to the people in America, in the United States right now, they're in a depression. They're lining up for food. So, you can talk about a recession in terms of this corporate America, but the people are having pain and suffering right now. And it's only going to get worse, because we've been propping them up with $600 here and that sort of thing. And now we're trying to decide, are we going to give them any money at all? Maybe 300. And 300 is not enough. And they're not going to be able to eat or pay rent. And this is happening on the streets of the United States right now. And the Dow is not an indicator of the economy. It's a false thing to think that way. So these giant corporations are doing fine. And they're going to keep doing fine. To the people, we should be using the word depression, not recession, because when you're lining up for food, you're experiencing a depression. Now, this is different from the economy. The economy itself is getting what a double hit, like Bill was suggesting, because the first wave, a lot of people shut down their business, and these are people close to the retirement age, and okay, so it's not worth it for them to keep fighting. I'm just going to retire. And the second wave is going to hit the people that are younger, starting businesses, and they are not going to make it. They're going to go out of, and they don't have savings. They are just flat out broke, and there's no stimulus check that's coming to them right now. That's uncertain if they will get it. What size will it be, and will it matter in their lives? And this is the thing that I think is essential about this. We have to resolve this election. We have to have a person who's going to be caring about the people and not about the giant corporations. And if we don't do that, if we get somebody that cares about the giant corporations, these people are going to continue to suffer. And the pain and suffering is going to be worse than the Great Recession by far, and back to the Great Depression, and maybe even challenging that. That's the kind of uncertainty, fear, and pain and suffering that the people of the United States are going to be feeling, while the giant corporations are fat, dumb, and happy and still raking in millions. And the investors in these giant corporations are going to be fat, dumb, and happy too. But the people who are struggling to start their small businesses are going to be flat broke and not being able to afford food and lining up to get food. So this is what's facing the United States right now. And we can't play politics with this and think like, oh, I'm a Republican, I should vote for the person with an R next to their name. We got to be thinking about someone who cares about the people and not about the Dow. Who cares that the Dow is going up? I don't care. Maybe an investor cares, maybe, but you know, this is where you're going to have to be making investment decisions. Okay, you know, everybody on the giant corporations are going to get more and more money. And my choices get very narrow. I don't have this wide range of choices. The companies that I like them. I'm passionate about what they're doing. No, they're not going to make it. Can't invest in them. And so this is a real crisis that we're facing. Sorry, Sasha.
Jim,
I had to sneak all of that in.
Jim, basically you are making. There is a case what you just made of two Americas. One, a giant corporation, wealthy people, and another one where people are in the soup kitchen and trying to survive and have no job, no money, absolutely no nothing, right? First of all, is it possible to reconciliation? Is there possible some kind of mutual accommodation? Is there possible, there must be a way out of it, because it's not going to go on forever like that. Is any country where you had a giant separation between ruling class and people at the bottom, it ended up with either war or revolution or whatever it might be. Shaquille, what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think Jim makes a very important point, and it's something that I think a lot of countries, you know, have had to battle with. And the US, it's a little bit more pronounced, as I've said, perhaps in previous shows, where there is that sort of concern and that worry as well about the US as being the world's reserve currency, as well as international investment money flowing in. But as Jim says, that doesn't really help the everyday person and the family that's struggling, or you know, the poor kids that are just graduating out of high school today. You know, what do they do? Or if they've just graduating out of college and then they can't, you know, get a job. And you know, during the Great Recession, we actually saw people who, you know, just for example, who are in the finance industry, they're working for a bank, they're earning good money. The next thing you know, they're working in a coffee shop just trying to survive. You know, and you still actually do have quite a big homeless population, especially in California. So, you know, do you need more homeless people? That's obviously not going to be a particularly good thing. And I think that's going to be one of the issues, is that if you have, you know, this very top-heavy thing where all the corporations are not just making a lot of money, but are sitting on a lot of money, and it's not going to the bottom, when things do resolve themselves, when the coronavirus is over, what workforce do you have? It's very, very unfortunate, but when you see events like this happen for a prolonged period of time, you do see a massive increase in suicide rates. You see a massive increase in drug abuse and substance abuse. And, you end up with a generation of people that, are very much behind the eight ball when it comes to their ability to actually participate in any recovery that there is. You also are faced with a couple of serious issues in that manufacturing will be under threat because of political instability in the US. Do we start looking at other countries for manufacturing jobs and other types of jobs, as well as the fact that a lot of these companies that are doing quite well and will continue to do quite well are not that reliant on consumers from the United States. They're more reliant on consumers internationally, especially big tech companies. They get a lot of their revenue internationally, and that props up the stock price just in the United States. So that, of course, causes a problem. When you start to think about, stores like Target, Walmart, and Walgreens, and all those, Home Depot, and all those sorts of stores, how do they recover? And then we're just talking about the big ones. I'm not even talking about small businesses right now. How do those companies recover? Where do they get their new sales from if the people, the everyday person is struggling and isn't buying food from Walmart because they've got no money and they're lining up at soup kitchens? So that is going to be a problem, and I think that's how that plays out is, again, why I think it's very hard to assess and why the market's getting very jittery, because it just doesn't know what the political circumstances would be. It would be kind of, if you could kind of make this coronavirus happen either 2 years ago or in 2 years' time from now, it'd be a bit different because you wouldn't have this sort of extra layer that you've got in the United States with that political uncertainty. Also, of course, the elephant in the room is the debt levels of the United States. You're well above now the 100% of GDP. Years ago when Obama was around, and even before him when George Bush was around, there was that big concern about, hey, do we really want to have debt levels that are hitting 100% of our GDP? Well, you've gone past that already. And that's a problem. Like, for example, in Australia, we've got a debt roughly 550. It'll probably be about 600, 700 billion. But that's still less than our GDP. It's about a third, 50, 60% of our GDP. Whereas in the United States, you're already over that. So all of those things, I think, have to come into play, and how it
Shaquille,
plays out.
I think Bill had something to say. I think you're making a great point, but I think, Bill, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I did. It was a question, and I've misplaced it right now. So,
that's a pity.
Okay. All right.
That was a pity because that was actually the end of the sentence.
That's welcome to live TV, right?
right.
But
That's great.
I do want to say in response that everything Shaquille is saying is spot on. But the idea here is that take the UK, for example. Their government is giving coupons to people to go out to restaurants. Now, the restaurants give them food, have the check, and they have money now to pay the staff. So this is a very useful way of the government intervening to get money into people's hands so they can spend it, and then employment starts to grow as well. Now, this makes total sense to me, but what we have in the United States is we call that socialism, and it's a bad thing. And so we can't do things like that would put the government to work for the people to make the pain less suffering and also boost the economy by getting people to stay in business and employ staff and other people that, cooks. If you keep a restaurant open, you employ people. So this is not a hard equation in my mind, but if we try to go down that road in the United States, it's socialism, and we can't have that.
Listen, may I interject? I lived for over 20 years in Soviet Union. What could be more socialist or communist place than Soviet Union? Can you imagine anything like that? However, I was.
That's not either one. Russia is not either one.
Right.
Russia is a totalitarian state. That's not socialist. That's not communism.
Wait a sec. You're talking about today's Russia, or you are talking about Soviet Union?
Because he grew up in the Soviet Union.
The Soviet Union was,
I'm
according
talking about the
to,
Soviet Union. Yes.
okay, according to teachings of Marx and Lenin, which I read, and I know a few things about that, the first
did too.
step in order to build up a communism, we need to accomplish a first step, which is socialism. Socialism was, in fact, accomplished even in Stalin's time. Socialism was built by about 1936, when it was 18th conference of the Communist Party. That was a time when it was acknowledged that the complete socialism system was built in Soviet Union. Now, the second stage now to build a communism. That was, for some reason, a little bit more complicated and never was accomplished. The last time I heard that Nikita Khrushchev, he announced that the communism will be built in Russia in 1980. And in fact, this Olympiad in Moscow of 1980 was exactly that year, because it was a year when the communism will be finally built in Soviet Union. Now, that was contradicting the teachings of Marx, who predicted that first of all, he predicted that the socialism revolution has to be in the most developed industrialist country in the world, which Russia was never been. So it should have been either England, maybe United States, which was just too far away for all that stuff. Then when he had to leave Russia, and he lived for several years in Switzerland, so then he believed that it should be Switzerland, because Switzerland is a very developed country with very interesting mix of languages, people, religions, or so on. So it would be a very nice experiment to build up socialism in Switzerland. And in fact, while he was there, last time when I was in Switzerland, actually, I visited a museum, a chess museum in Zurich. But also, I had excursion, and the guide us drove by nearby the Zurich's library. It's a very old building, a huge library. And he said in 1917 was a small man with a bird, and he was coming every day right to the opening, and then he was sitting almost all day there, reading all the newspapers in all languages and so on. And guess who he was? It was Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. So Lenin was one. He was attended all kind of workmen's gatherings, and he was very popular. He was invited almost like got several invitations a day, and they were after work. They were getting together. They were drinking beer, and then they were allow him to have a speech. And of course, he was talking about upcoming revolution or so on, and they loved him because they were already drunk. And it was a great entertainment to have talking about revolution and all this stuff. It was just great entertainment. So coming back to our time, I don't see. Oh, by the way, what I discovered several years ago is that Sweden considered to be a socialist country. So what I've learned about what is a socialism in Russia and what is socialism in Sweden, and whatever kind of socialism people are trying to imagine possible in United States, they are all different models, have nothing to do in common whatsoever. So when people are saying that, oh, Biden and Democrats, they will come to power, they will build the socialism, it's going to be communist country or so on, people have no idea what they're talking about whatsoever. Absolutely, 100%, trust me.
Well, I think if we talk about the big finance experts and the big banks, I think that they can hardly complain about socialism. I'm certainly not a socialist, but as far as I'm concerned, if you are a bank and you socialize your losses by pushing it across to the taxpayer, it's pretty rich for you to then say we're not socialists, we want lower taxes. But I really do think
how
that
about
the calamity of the Sorry.
How about the owners of the NFL football team? The NFL owners, they are socialists, but they don't think, they say they're capitalists, but they practice socialism in the NFL. The owners do, not the players.
Unfortunately, I can't comment on your sports. It's not something that I watch. So, I mean, when I found out the World Series,
Sasha would say, take my word for it.
Yeah, well, when I found out the World Series had only ever been won by the United States and has recently just been won by Canada or something in the last decade, I thought, gee, it's a wonder how the US keeps winning the World Series. I just can't work out why. So
it's a little cheap, Elvis, I agree.
But you're right what you say. I mean, a lot of these people that will often say we want low tax rates and less regulations, and then when things go wrong, they want to push their losses onto everybody else. That's not a good idea. But to get back to the markets for a moment, I look at the markets like today, for example. I'm looking at the Dow. I think the Dow's up about 1%, just over 1%. The S&P 500 is up 1%. But if you're a person who's retired, you're not even getting 1% on your money per year right now if you've got your money in the bank. So clearly that's going to cause some issues. And I sort of said before, my main concern there is whether or not the US would remain as attractive moving forward, because international money has to look at it and go, well, if I want to sell a product, you would think, if I want to sell a product, I want to sell T-shirts, what's the greatest market to sell it into? It's the United States. But if you don't have that consumer base, that's going to be a problem. And there are other countries like Australia and places like that who, you said before, Jim, that the UK is offering vouchers for people to go out to restaurants and eat. In Australia, we've got a thing called the JobKeeper. Now, I'm fortunate enough not to need to be on that, so I don't fully understand what it is, but it's essentially a payment. I think it's around $1,500 a fortnight, Australian dollars a fortnight. They're going to people or going to their employers to give to people so that they're not being laid off. There is a time limit, I think it's about 3 months or something, but then there are some other things that come into play to help those people. If you're not helping individual people, and especially small businesses, when people talk about Sweden being a socialist country, remember that Sweden is a great place to do business. They're very business friendly. The government will actually hold your hand to help you to set your business up and provide with financial support to make sure that you can employ people and stay around in times that are tough, not just when it's tough for the whole economy, but whether it's tough just for your individual business. I think it's very difficult for the US to do those sorts of things because of how politically divided they are on these issues.
We have short attention.
Sorry, Jim, you mentioned that I forgot to mention Friedrich Engels. Okay, Friedrich Engels, in fact, he was a very, very smart man, scientist, historian, and he knew probably 5 times as much as Marx knew. However, he got into history as essentially financier of Marx, because Marx was fantastic genius as a scientist, historian, writer, but he was lousy at making money and support his family. He could never do that, and all his wives and the children, they were all hungry, broken, and but he was a great man. Other than that, he was just fantastic. But thanks to Engels, he was always the rent was paid, the food was on the table, so he could continue writing Das Kapital and his other writings, and so on. Now, Lenin was able to support himself because he was from a well-to-do family. Stalin, there are a lot of talk about who was his real father, and it's still not unclear, so I don't want to comment on that because I know just as much as you can read anywhere in probably Wikipedia and so on. Same thing with all other Russian leaders, starting from whoever, the Khrushchev, and finish with Putin. The only thing is everybody loves Gorbachev. He was a great reformer, and he had a lovely, unfortunately late wife, Raisa. And the joke is that she was the first wife of Russian prime minister who waited less than the prime minister or general secretary himself.
Well, it's
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah. So
Well, I was just going to. Yeah, the idea that Shaquille is talking about, and you were talking about earlier about this socialism is not the same everywhere, but in the United States we not only have a very short attention span, but we like things in black and white, either or. That's how we understand things, and I'm speaking in a generalization, of course. But so we want to know capitalism or socialism or slash communism or slash anarchy. And we think of things like that when it's much more complicated. These things bleed into each other. A country like Sweden is part capitalist, part socialist. It's neither one or the other. And it's a very nice country from everything I've learned about it. Switzerland, I've been to, very nice country, very well organized. And, you know, whether or not it's a socialist or capitalist country doesn't seem to matter as much. We get into these sound bites. That's all the American public can absorb is a sound bite. And we can't think about a more complicated question in a more complicated way. So this is why our politics is so vicious. And because we're just, want to blame somebody else for our problems. It can't be my fault. It's got to be your fault.
Okay.
I think that's a big point, Jim, about the short attention that people have today. You guys were talking about this on Startup Wednesdays earlier about like the 1 minute clips and the 20-minute delivery of an idea and that sort of thing. Right. that is an issue. And the thing is, look, all countries, including Sweden, do have their problems. But most countries have a mixture. In most countries that aren't the US, you have a socialized healthcare system, you have a socialized education system, all those sorts of things. But you have a sort of a capitalist base. And even if you actually have a look at I guess the people that are considered to be the most extreme on the left in the US, like Bernie Sanders doesn't actually say he's a socialist. He says he wants businesses to flourish and all of that sort of stuff. He just wants it to be a different system. Now, I may personally disagree with what he wants to do, but that's not the issue. The issue is, is what he's suggesting going to be something that's going to be good for the majority of people? Is that going to have a good economic impact on everyday people as well as the markets, that sort of thing? And that's what you have to look at when you're assessing the markets. It's not about what you want to have happen or what you think is a good idea or a bad idea. It's about trying to assess what you think the effect of that's going to be on the markets. And then secondarily, what effect that's going to have on the people. Now, obviously, Jim and Bill, living in the United States, you're going to care a bit more about what's happening to American people than I will. I'm obviously more focused on what's happening to Australian people and Australian families, and the British are more concerned about the British people. But one of the things that I think is going to be very difficult for the US to ever do is to ever really get a consensus on some of these issues at any time, because there's a lot of states, there's too many different players. If you talk about a country like Switzerland or Sweden or many of these other countries, they're much smaller, and they tend not to be as multicultural and as diverse as countries like the UK or Australia or the US or Canada, for that matter. So I think that makes it a little bit more difficult for you guys to really get things done.
Well, I can tell you that that's why we call it the American spirit, and we know here in America it takes a village, it takes a nation to build. So by hook or by crook, we're confident, and we're going to pull ahead, which is why we're the world leader, Shaquille. And so,
well,
I'm not taking that. No, I'm not taking that away from you. And I certainly, I hope.
Shaquille.
Sorry, go, Jim.
There's nothing wrong with the United States that what's good about the United States can't fix. But we got to knuckle down and fix it. There's some hard work ahead of us.
Right. That's right. And then maybe Sasha will decide that it's better in the United States than Canada.
Well, for many years, in Canada, I always believed that it's better in the United States. Mm-hmm. And I always was very critical of Canada, except when we had Harper as a prime minister. Those years, I think it's a golden years for Canada. He was very popular, and he wrote the book, which I read, and I enjoyed that very much. And I hope that the Conservatives will make up the power very soon back in Canada. And but lately, I started to analyze what's wrong with the United States. Never mind the Trump problem, there is much more to it. So don't forget that the democracy is European subject. It's nothing but European constitution. It started in ancient Greece 2,500 years ago. It was always European, purely European institution. And US, when they organized United States, basically, British people still believe that they're all outlaws who just broke from Queen and so on. They all have to be prosecuted. But too little, too late, as we say. Okay, so they're trying to build a democracy, but it's European constitution. And how the democracy can work in a country which is divided between rich and poor, white and black, people of different religion, different races, different customs. There are, of course, Latino people that I didn't mention. There are just so many contradictions. However, for so many years, it was all glued together and worked, right? All of a sudden now, because of one person, it started to fall apart. So one person can defeat the over 200 years institution, democracy, which was still, whether you want it or not, but it was in the United States and it no longer exists. What am
I can say to Phil, many of us, really do, and I especially, I will never bet against the United States, but I certainly hope that you guys recover and that will take some unity. But I will say, if things don't go to plan, we will welcome you back into the Commonwealth, and the Democratic People's Republic of New England can just come back into the Commonwealth and rejoin us. We have no problems with that.
Well, thank you. We built
I prefer California just seceded. I prefer that California just secede, and would be fine on our own. But the basic point of the history lesson of the United States, I would like to comment on, because we did have this little thing called the Civil War. The democracy wasn't just a great idea without any problems and flowing, and all of a sudden one person shows up and it's at risk. No, these forces have been fighting each other throughout our history. It was a great experiment, and Ben Franklin once said, when he was asked, do we have a monarchy or a republic? He replied, we have a republic if we can keep it. So it's always been in doubt, and it's always been only the informed citizens that have kept it together during our darkest hours. And so we are lacking in an informed citizen.
Could be. Maybe you're not able to keep it anymore. Maybe you are unable to keep it anymore.
No.
That's what I'm talking about, Sasha.
No. I know but that's not what you're saying. That's your concern and that's your fear. And Sasha, that's your question. I can provide the answer. The answer is that yes, we are going to keep it. This is just another blip, and we'll go through it and we'll learn from it and we'll figure it out. But at least for now, we can hold on for 62 more days, because in 62 more days, we'll know which of the three options, Sasha, that you presented. We'll know, Shaquille, what the investors are going to be, where they're going to be running with the money, whether it's UK or US debt. Jim, hopefully you'll be satisfied that our republic is intact. And I hope to see you guys again here on IBM TV. So that hopeful message is the one I'd like.
And on that, I would like to thank you very, very much to all participants of our program today. I hope to see you all next Wednesday on Modern Investing with Sasha. Thank you so much. Have a good trading week, or whatever is left. And thank you for IBM TV for hosting the program. Bye-bye, everybody.
See you.